Hey everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well and welcome to episode 76 of my Metal Vault, where I will be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within heavy metal to thrash metal to death metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it, all of that excellent stuff, as well as talking about the albums. I'll also be talking about the band, so a brief history and any releases leading up to the album that I have picked. And before I crack on with this album here and the band, sorry, it's been a while since my last one. Was rehearsing for the Metal to the Masters with my band Oscaria. It was our first gig, and we ended up winning that heat along with Vulture God and Monochrome. And we got a gig coming up this Saturday, which I'm looking absolutely forward to. But I'll mention that in a different video on here. And there'll be another collection update as well, and I haven't done one since the 1st of April. But anyway, let's crack on with this album here. And I've been looking on YouTube and I don't see very many others within the VC mentioning this album. Of course, you can find this album on YouTube, and it's a cracking release. You should definitely check it out. And yeah, this band don't get talked about very much. I haven't seen very many talk about it, and I've mentioned them in one of my older videos from 2 years ago. And it's the band Excruciate. And they only released one album back in 1993 and didn't release anything else after that. But let's crack on with Excruciate and their 1993 album, Passage of Life. And what an album this is. It's just, yeah, man. I've got my notes right here to say what I think of it. And I love this album. Released by Thrash Records, and of course released on Dot Descent and Dark Symphonies. This is a re-release, it's not the original pressing, which of course always on the hunt for an original release of an album. And there's, of course, before I show the booklet, let's show the CD. Of course, we've got their logo right there on a nice clear CD. Of course, says there, and on 2019 Excruciate. And the artwork right here, as well as the band on the back in the woods, and band pictures with lyrics. So there's two of the guys right there, and also here, and just checking I haven't gotten over a page. There we go, and right here as well, who did what in the band, and more pictures here. And I think there's a couple more right here. And that's your lot. Now, like I said, I've not seen very many people talk about this album. I did find a couple of metal YouTubers talking about it in their collections, like underrated albums, which I'll be watching a little bit later after I've done this. Because one's in like a one of those tier lists. But yeah, this album here, I do recommend that you check this out if you love your old school underground death metal. Because this is definitely underground, very underrated band, very underrated album. But let's talk about Excruciate. And of course, the last three bands I talked about all from Sweden. And of course, these guys are as well from Stockholm. That is the last one in that list of episodes. Because all the ones I've spoken about were all from Sweden. Like I said, but these guys are from Stockholm, and when you think Stockholm, you think HM2. And I don't think these guys use HM2 on this album or any of the demos that they released before this. And speaking of the demos, well, they formed in 1989, split up in 1993 after this album was done, reformed in 2001, split up sometime around that time. Reformed in 2006, but don't know when they split up and called it a day. But before that, they released their first demo in April of 1990 called Mutilation of the Past, independent release cassette. 100 copies of that on a, well, it says here version of red tape, and all some reissues on CD from Dot Symphonies and The Crypt. So, but obviously before that, they would have released it themselves. And then in 1991, February of 1991, they released Hymns of Mortality, another independent release. And that does have a re-release on Into It Records, which, if you know the cover, it's the yellow skull cover with the gravestones and the zombies coming out and dragging their victim pretty much down in the ground. So you're going to know that one from when I get to the split, which was with Epitaph. And what a great split it is. Both sides of that split are just, just absolute class. And this was released by Infest Records, which are not going anymore, but when I looked them up, they specialized in thrash metal, death metal, and black metal. And I forgot to mention who was the vocalist on their very first demo, because you're going to know his name as soon as I say it. Christopher Janssen of Varian was the vocalist on that release, because he did quite a few guest appearances on other bands, with other bands on their releases as well, and guest vocals for Epitaph, Seeming Salvation, which of course I've mentioned here on my Metal Vault. But yeah, Christopher Janssen of Varian was their vocalist for that release. And for Hymns of Mortality, that was Christian Carlson, who had a band before or after Excruciate, but hasn't done anything else since. And getting on to, of course, the split, that was the one, Hymns of Mortality. And to look up the Epitaph one, which is, I believe, their first demo, which I mentioned there, but yeah, I think it's that one. Just needed to confirm, but yeah, so that split. So from that split to their only album, Passage of Life, which I mentioned was released on Thrash Records in 1993, in July of that year. And of course, released on various other labels, because in 2009 it was released on The Crypt, which is the one that the band's currently on. The name of the band name's on anyway. The other CD, which is this one I have here, is from Dark Symphonies, and also there is a cassette released by Into It Records. So I got the Dark Symphonies release right here. And of course, the lineup I show you, I think that's the one everyone's going to know, which has Lars on vocals. So we've got Frederick on bass, Per on drums, Hamper on guitars, Lars on vocals, and Johan on guitar. So this lineup here, and I think that, like I said, I think that's the one everyone's going to know the most. And you've probably noticed as well that, let me just get there. Yeah. He's wearing a necrophobic long sleeve, but it says Benediction on the sleeves. I don't know if Benediction came over to play a show with Necrophobic and they did like a shirt where it has Necrophobic on the front of the shirt and their name and Benediction's name on the sleeves, or it was a misprint of some kind, but either way it still looks really cool. Not entirely sure on that, but there you go. Still looks cool. Yes, now who did what for the album? So Christian, who I've mentioned before, I'm not gonna try and say his last name, who's done artwork for various other bands such as Amorphis and At the Gates, Bathory, Atheist. And who else? Crystal Age, Crystal Eyes, Dark Funeral, Dark Tranquility, and the list just goes on. And Thomas Stogspoke, of course, when I say his last name, you're gonna know who I'm on about. Dismember, Entombed, Amorphis, but yeah, Amorphis, Monomorph. Yeah, you're gonna know that name as soon as I say his name. What's the first thing you come to? Sunlight Studios, and of course, list goes on. So I'm not gonna name every single band right here. Let's name one more. Varian, and of course for the other things. So Daniel did the logo for this band, and looked when I was looking up this way before. This was the only thing I think he ever did as well. Of course, he was the guitarist in another band that Lars was in, and as well as playing bass with Unanimated on In the Forest of the Dreaming Dead. And of course, did the logo not just for Excruciate, but for also Internal Decay, who are still currently active. And for the design, Hans did the design, I think, might have been for the artwork here. Johan doing, I think, more of the design and some photography for the album, and then Nils did photography for this album, and then Christopher Janssen of Theriod, of course, did the lyrics for track number 4 on this album. So let's crack on with the album itself. How many tracks have we got? We got 8 tracks overall, and a couple of them were on their last demo before this album was recorded and released. So, track number 1, which is the first track I ever heard by these guys, Confused Mind, which has that atmospheric opening with the wind blowing and that like that haunting sort of ambient sound, and it's just yeah, just setting the mood, and all of a sudden just kicks in with the guitars, the bass, and the drums, and then Lars comes in with his vocals, and then quite a doomy song to start with, and then it picks up a little bit, and then it slows down a little bit more towards the end. And then we have Endless Suffocation, the second track, carrying on from there. Another killer track with some killer riffage and just insane vocals from Lars. Some good old chunky bass right there, some blasting drums, and then Inhumation, Postnatal, which is their third track on this album. Still just carrying on the brutality with just everything complementing each other from all the instruments to the vocals. And then Eternal Incubation, another stellar track right there. Just going to get a bit of this. Just again carrying on the brutality, and just some intensity right there, and again still a bit doomy right there. And then we got Anatomical Self-Fraternization, which of course all these songs do speed up, and then here you got some more mid-tempo range right there, mid-tempo to a bit faster from there. And then we got the track number 6, the title track of the album, Passage of Life, which has this cool little keyboard moment in there, along with the drummer hitting the toms, and then the guitar and bass doing the chugs. Just fits so well with the song. And then we got, which is one of 2 tracks from their last demo. This is Sabbath in the Mortuary, which you know just starts off strong. It speeds up, and then you got this cool little bass bit from 157 to 205, and it's just I don't know what the effect of it is on it, but it's just this really cool, like wavy sort of effect. I can't picture it at the moment or describe it, but it's just fits so well and it just adds much more of a atmospheric tone to it. And then we end with track number 8, which is, of course, one of the other tracks from that demo of Hymns of Mortality, Beyond the Circle, which just, again, with that doomy element to it, just, I mean, like I said, it's got that doomy element, but it's still 100% a death metal record. And that finishes off this album perfectly, 42 minutes and 16 seconds long. You can't go wrong. Excuse me. And yeah, like I said, this album doesn't get talked about very much. I've not heard very many people talk about this. And I've mentioned albums that would have been overlooked, and I'm pretty sure this would have been overlooked as well. Because this came out around the same time as The Erosion of Sanity by Gorguts and Stillborn by Method Creation, as well as various other death metal, thrash metal albums at that time. But yeah, definitely one that would have been overlooked for sure. But for those who are like just death metal through and through, would have picked this up and been like, yeah, this is it. And of course, like I said, these guys are from Stockholm in Sweden. And I mentioned already, but I'm going to mention again. What do you think when I say Stockholm? I think the HM2, which I will actually show you, which is right there, and over there. Getting it ready for my gig, just to let you know. And yeah, when you think that, and I don't think that pedal was ever on this album. Like I said, I don't think they ever used it, but regardless, it's still a monster of a record, and you can't go wrong with that. And like I said before, if it's a band, a death metal band, regardless if they use the HM2 or not, I'm still gonna love it because death metal is my favorite genre within metal. And this has become one of my favorite albums when I first heard it, and I was like, I need to get it, and I finally got it. Yeah, I got this at FilmFest actually, because there was a bunch of albums being sold, and someone was selling albums on a little store, and this was in, and I thought I'm going to pick this up, and yeah, love, just still love it now. I'm still going to love it, and if you're not familiar with this album, I'm going to put a link down below of this video, a description in the description, a link in the description. That's what I was trying to say. A link in the description of this album so you can have a listen for yourselves and also list the demos as well. But yeah, definitely an album worth your time if you are a die-hard death metal fan. Definitely one for you. And overall conclusions, of course, it's heavy. It's just got heavy riffs. It's dark. It's evil. It's doomy. It's atmospheric. And most importantly, it's a timeless masterpiece. Just excellent, excellent death metal. And again, love your death metal. This is definitely for you. Excruciate and Passage of Life. Just excellent, underrated underground death metal right here. Just a cracking release. And that is it for this episode of My Metal Vault. Sorry it took so long to get around to recording a new video. Like I said, I've been busy, but I will be back with more episodes regularly, as well as more of collection updates once I have more stuff to show you. And yeah, it's good to be back doing this again. So if you enjoyed my content, Don't forget to like this video, share it around, comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with more My Metal Vault, as well as Jake's Metal Chat interviews, collection updates, and so on. And that's it from me. I've been Jacob Jake's Metal Chat. Keep that banner of metal well and truly high, and I'll see you all again in another episode of My Metal Vault. Please take care of yourselves.